Welcome back to another day, another coffee and a chat. And I don't have my coffee in here yet. It's brewing right now. I am in serious need of a coffee break. And so while it's doing its thing, I thought, you know what? I'm going to come in here and do my thing. I just wanted to kind of share a fun story with you today. I don't think I've shared. See, now we're getting to the point where I've been doing this for over 2 months, at least one video a day, and there were a couple of days I had a couple of bonus videos in there. So trying to remember what stories I've told. I've got to go back and catalog these or something, but that's so much work. I know I'll get Gail to be my secretary and make her do it. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But I don't think I've told this story here. And I want to tell it. It's about my great-grandma. My great-grandma Neufeld. And I was 8 when she passed away. So I got to know her pretty good. We were there almost every week that we went to see them. My dad was very, very close to his grandparents. And she was something else, my great-grandma was. She was a strong woman. I know I've mentioned that before, that she had, I can't remember if it's 8 or 9 children, but she buried all of them in their childhood. I mean, they were like, 6, 7, 12 years old. I mean, they weren't like, it wasn't miscarriages. It wasn't passed away at birth. Not that that's any less painful, but it's got to be very different when you've had a child growing up and you think you're going to see them grow to an adult, and out of all her children, only 4 made it to adulthood. And there were just a couple of times when we talked about that a little, and because I just couldn't imagine what, even as a little girl, I couldn't wait to grow up and be married and have kids. What was I thinking? I had it all romanticized in my mind, and then you find reality. But as a child, even, I just could not imagine how you would go through something like that, to have to bury one of your children. But she buried 4 or 5, because I can't remember how many there were, but there were 4 or 5 children that she buried at different times as they were growing up. And we used to go and put flowers on the graves every Memorial Day. And so that was kind of a big thing in our family. And so great-grandma, she would talk about them. And she had 2 sets of twins. And the one set, both of them, it was a little boy and a little girl, and both of them had passed away at different times. And then the other set was 2 boys, and one was my Uncle Sam, and he was hilarious. He was an American Baptist preacher and a man with a sense of humor and a half. But his twin brother had passed away in childhood, and so they had made a headstone, and they put my Uncle Sam's name on it too when they had the headstone made for the one brother. And that, I remember, I used to really bug Uncle Sam. And so as kids, we thought it was funny. We'd go put flowers on, at his headstone, even though he wasn't there. But my great-grandma would tell us stories, and they had, in their backyard, they had this swing. I don't know what you call them, but it's got a bench on each side, and it glides back and forth, so you can sit 4 people on there, 2 facing, this way and 2 facing, so you can look at each other. And so my brothers would sit on one side, and Grandma and I would sit on the other, and she would tell us stories. She had grown up in Minnesota. I do believe that's right. And her family made bricks by hand. I mean, this was in the 1800s. And so, she would tell us about growing up in the brickyard, and all that little clicking that you're probably hearing in the background, that's my dogs walking around or shuffling around. They don't pick up their feet when they walk, they shuffle them. And I hear that back on the video when I watch these things back. So if you're hearing that shh, 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 yeah, that's them. Because they've always got to come see what I'm doing in case there's somehow food around here. Because, yeah, that's their love. Okay, so back on the swing with great-grandma. Well, I remember there was one favorite story that I had, and I'd always say, tell it again, Grandma, tell it again. And that's the one I want to share with you. my grandmother, my great grandmother, was well into her 20s. Like, I want to say she was like 28 or 29. I mean, she was an old maid. She was beyond getting married. She was so old, and and that's the way the culture was back then. And I mean, she should have been married 10 years earlier easily. And so, kind of hope had been given up on that she would ever marry, let alone that she would have a family. And so she was out in Minnesota, and her parents and some of her younger siblings were, I think she was the oldest of the children in her family. If not, she was pretty close to it. She would have at least been the oldest girl. But her family was out in the state of Oregon, in a little town called Dallas. If you know of Dallas, Oregon, that's where a lot of my family still lives. And it's a bedroom community to Salem, Oregon now. And it's got a lot more people in it than it did when I was a little girl, or when my dad was growing up, because that's where my dad grew up. My dad and my Aunt Joyce. So anyway, in Dallas, they were at the church there, the Mennonite Brethren Church, and there was a young pastor that was in his early 20s, because he was a little younger than Grandma. She was a cougar before cougar. Oh, if she knew what that was and I called her that, she'd be really mad at me. So scratch that. Okay, so anyway, my great-grandfather was there preaching, and he was a young preacher. In fact, he told us stories. He was a honest-to-goodness circuit-riding preacher at times where he loved horses and mules. He was very good with them. And so he would get on his horse and just start riding from little town to little town, and wherever they let him stop and preach, he'd stop, set up camp, and he'd preach for a few days or a week or whatever, and head on out to to the next place that he'd come to. And in his lifetime, I mean, he saw electricity come into people's homes and plumbing. They didn't have any of that when he was little. He saw the first cars. He saw airplanes come into existence, and TVs and telephones. He even saw the first man walk on the moon. There were so many things that happened in his lifetime that he saw. And he also was a very, very fascinating man. He lived till I was 16, well, almost 16. His funeral was on my sweet 16th birthday. That's how we celebrated, was said goodbye to Grandpa. But Grandma, coming back to Grandma, I may have to start this video all over again. My husband will be going, see, there you are, bird dogging all over the place. And guys, that's just who I am. All right, it's part of what makes me so lovable. Okay, so Grandma, her parents sent a letter and said, you need to come out here because this young preacher's out here preaching. And he's single. And, and he's of the Neufelds, and they were Rempels, and marriage between the families was okay. It was an acceptable clan to marry into. You need to get out here. So great-grandma headed out to Oregon. However it was that she got there, because I don't even know how she traveled. I never asked her that, because things were very different back then. So anyway, she comes out to Oregon, and she assesses the situation on the first Sunday. She said, I saw, because Grandpa was very handsome, and she goes, and I saw all these single women just making fools out of themselves. They're all baking him pies. And then they're all giving him the pies and then inviting him, if he wants to come to Sunday dinner, they'd cook Sunday dinner for him, but he never accepted the invitation to go to their homes. But he always took the pie. She goes, I thought I was just going to see that man turn into some big old fat guy from eating all these pies. So she was like, I thought, he's got a pretty good thing going here. He's got all these women cooking him pies, baking him pies and offering him meals. He isn't taking the meals. He obviously isn't interested in any of them, but he does like the pies. So she watched how they were all trying to get his attention. She goes, I knew I had to come up with a different plan because that was my husband, and I knew it. And even though I was too old to get married, and and people had given up on me a long time ago, nope. I knew finally I was standing there looking at the man that God had held for me. And so, we'd go, well, what'd you do, Grandma? What'd you do? Because this was the best part. She goes, well, I went up to him and I said, I see you don't have a choir. And he's like, no, we don't, because we don't have a choir director. She goes, well, here I am. I'm your choir director. And so, let's put a choir together. And so she put a choir together, and then she said on Sunday mornings, she'd go up there and she'd stand and, like right here, and Grandpa'd be sitting in his chair right here, on the platform. And so she'd start waving her hands and everybody'd sing, and she'd wink at him and wave her hands and wink at him. And she kept doing that. And in a couple of weeks, they were engaged. I remember thinking that was just the funniest thing I ever heard. That's what moved him. Now, he'd tell you, no, he knew that was the wife God had been holding for him. And they were such a well-made couple. They were definitely handpicked for each other. Or maybe they'd just grown that way by the time I knew them. But no, I think they were handpicked for each other. And so we used to love that. And I'd ask Grandma, so you knew how to direct choir? She goes, no, I just figured you just wave your hand. She goes, but I knew how to wink. So I know that there's some of you guys out there that you're trusting God for some things. And some of you have been a little discouraged lately that maybe it's not there because it's taking too long or it's not going to happen. God's got his own timing for things. And yes, Grandma was almost 30 years old before she found a husband. And they got married. I think they got married New Year's Day. They either got married New Year's Day or January 7th. And then my grandmother, their oldest child, got married on the other date. So one of them was married New Year's Day and the other was January 7th. I believe that's how that went. But anyway, and I know it snowed and they had to do the wedding a little different than they had planned. They just went to the preacher's house and their family was there with them, and not everybody could make it because of the snow. But they had a lot of years together and a lot of children and a lot of memories, and they both loved the Lord with all their heart. She's the one that started, first, and then my grandmother, her oldest daughter, also would say the same thing to me, is that I can't always choose the circumstances in my life, but I can choose my attitude in them. And I think I had told about my great-grandmother and her children and losing some when I shared that about being content and having the right attitude in things, because I haven't always had the right attitude at all. But I'm working on it, and God's working on it in me. And are there things that I'm trusting him for? Yeah, there's a few things that, I've got some things that I'm trusting him for, and slowly and surely I'm seeing it come about. And some things, in my life that I've wanted, and he's told me, no, that's really not good for you. I'll tell you, when God says, no, it's really not good for you, I haven't always listened to him. If I could go back and do something different, it would be that. I'd go back and listen to him, because anytime God's told me, no, that's not good for you, and I've tried to go for it anyway, it has just turned into a huge regret. Don't need any more regrets. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of share that little story with you about my great-grandmother and maybe encourage you a little that even when it looks like it's too late and that nothing's going to happen or whatever. I told the story about my son being born. I wanted 12 children. I didn't get to have 12, which is probably good. But I thought it was over after I'd had my 2 daughters, because I couldn't have any more children. And I had health problems that prevented that. And yet, even in the midst of it, against all odds, boom, there was my baby boy. Totally didn't see that one coming. Yeah, it's never too late with God. You never know what he might do. Even just the fact that I'm as old as I am, but God gave me a husband who loves me and is so good to me. Even that was feeling out of reach, and I'd given up on that. But I just had to be patient. I just had to wait a little longer till I got to the right thing that God had for me. And that's the best thing. It's always best to wait on him. So if I'm waiting on him and he says no, I know it's the best thing. If I'm waiting on him and it takes a little time so that what he's chose for me comes to me, I'm doing a good thing. There's no losing on it. And there's no losing for you either. So keep sharing your heart with God. Keep trusting him. And then receive with joy whatever his answer is. All right. I love you guys. I thank those of you that are subscribing. Anybody, if you're watching this video and you're not subscribed, if any of these videos are touching your life and you maybe think it could just give you a little pick-me-up every day or a little entertainment or whatever, I would love for you to subscribe. Then you can hit that notification bell and it will let you know each day when I put the new video up, because they get up whenever they get up. I'm not on a schedule yet and may never be. But also hitting the like button, leaving comments. I love the comments. I love interacting with you. I love when you send me emails. I love all of it. But it also, the comments and the like button also helps me with YouTube so that they will maybe recommend my videos. And that's how I found most of you, or how you found me, was I showed up in your feed one day and you're like going, who is this person and why is she in my feed? But some of you guys, more than 100 of you, said, hey, I don't know, something about it, I kind of like her. I don't know. Or you're punishing yourself or whatever, I don't know, but we're buds now. All right, I love you guys. Share the videos with anybody you think it might touch and make a difference in their lives. And then have an awesome day today, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. I'll still be here.